Well, we ran out of time, so I'm doing part two and trying to share thoughts about Joan's question, uh, or Joan's request, maybe a better way to put it, about crossing over and coming back. And I would like to again say that this is part two of that, so you may want to find part one and check that out if you've come right to this one. Now, we've all heard stories, and I believe them. I don't have a real problem believing them of people who have been interviewed, who have clinically died and been dead for a few minutes and come back after those few minutes back to life, somewhat miraculously, to the astonishment of doctors. And they've shared a variety of different things that they experienced during that time where they were away. Uh, Common things are bright lights, or a bright white light, especially signposts, directions, uh, gardens, fragrances, and things like that. And but I got to say again in this part two that in my job in hospice, my job was to prepare them to cross over. I was not really to interject any personal thoughts or views or theology on the possibility of them coming back. Did not matter if I believed such things were possible or what the Bible said about such things. Hospice law and hospice regulation required that of me. And I closed the first session talking about a patient of mine, Mr. Fred. And kind of in a reality I experienced him with him around that Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 scripture about the great cloud of witnesses. I'm going to tell you another story, and in the first segment I mentioned that blue book, that handbook on the dying. And there was another thing that they talked about, which I really believe and came to believe, in that one of the last senses of ours that goes as we are nearing death is the sense of hearing. And so, if you are dealing right now with a terminally ill person, especially who is not responsive, I encourage you to continue to talk to them and to tell them what's on your mind. If you love them, if you forgive them, uh, things that meant a lot to you that they did for you, or times that you shared, because I believe they are still hearing that. And like I said, there is a very strong train of thought that the sense of hearing is the last sense to go. I'm going to tell you another story. Unlike Mr. Fred, there was another patient that I got, and when he was admitted to hospice, he was very deep into his last stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, which meant he was not responsive at all. And I my main job there was getting the family ready, and as I began to work with and deal with the family, it was a very difficult situation. The family were very poor. They lived in abject poverty, in squalor, and the father who was dying was a very abusive man. He had physically abused his wife and his children, certainly emotionally and mentally, and I'm sad to say he had sexually abused his daughters, all of them, and it was a very tough situation. There was a lot of anger, there was a lot of bitterness and resentment, and trying to work through that and get everybody to peace. We just shared, that somewhere down the line, before this happens, we got to try to reconcile. We got to try to make peace with this situation, and the family really responded to me. We really connected well, And every time that I would visit, and they were very, very high maintenance, so I spent a lot of time with them, I would make it a point to go to the father's bedside and pray for him. I would talk to him as if he could respond to me, even though he never responded to me in any way, shape, or form. I told him my name and what I was doing and how I was taking care of his family, and that they were going to be sharing things with him from time to time and asking him to listen. And I did that for about 3.5 months, and like I said, he was totally unresponsive. And on Friday night, one Friday night, I got a call about 10 o'clock at night from one of the daughters, who said, "Mark, can you come over right now? We don't know what's going on." And he was surging, like I had shared with you in part one. And they told me he was sitting up and talking very lucidly and talking very, very clearly. And he was actually asking for food. And you have to understand, this man had not eaten anything, by mouth the whole time that I had worked with him. So I hurried over there. And when I got there, all of the family had already arrived. And I went into the room, and he was sitting up in a bed. And another one of the daughters said the first thing he said was he asked them if they could cook for him one of his favorite meals. And so they began cooking it for him. By the time that I got there, he had already eaten it. And so, because they had lived a long way away from where I was at. And they all cleared out, and I went and sat down by him, and I said, "How you doing, Mr. Taylor?" And he just looked at me and he said, "I know you." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "You're Mark, and you've been coming and visiting me." And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I have." And he said, "You've prayed for me, and you've told me, many things. And a lot of the things that you told me about my children, they have told me, and here in the last hour or so, they've continued to talk to me like that." And so again, the surge was proven true. The sense of hearing obviously was at work in him while I was caring for him. And I asked him, as a priest, even though he was not of my denomination, they were in a strange way a very, very religious family. And if he wanted me to do last rites, because I just had to tell him. I said, things are pretty dire. And he said, he knew that, he understood that, and yes, he would like for me to do last rites for him. So we talked a little bit about his life. I said, was there anything he felt he hadn't shared with his children that he wanted to say? He did ask each and every one of them to come back to his bed individually so that he could, and he ultimately apologized to them verbally during this time that he was back with us during the surge. And I then went in and finished the service of last rites that I was doing for him. And about 15 minutes later, he laid back, and I called the nurse, a hospice nurse, to come. They immediately came out. They lived a little bit closer. And about 30 minutes later, again, very peacefully, he breathed his last. So, crossing over, I know a lot about. And if you ever saw the movie Steel Magnolias, when the mother is at the coffin of her daughter who has died, she said something that's very, very profound. She says, I was there when this beautiful creature breathed her first breath into this world, and I was there when she breathed her last. And I was there when my three children were born and breathed their first breaths, and it's a very powerful situation for sure. And in hospice, I was there when people breathe their last. And when somebody is ready and comfortable and at peace and they have reconciled everything that they know to reconcile, it is also a very, very, very powerful and profound experience. So hopefully this helps a little bit to folks who had these questions. I hope it has. You guys have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Be careful.